Hello everyone. As you may have read or heard, as of version 3.8025, Domoticz now has integrated support for an entirely new and easy way of writing Lua-based event scripts called dzVents. Earlier, dzVents was a separate add-on that you had to install manually, but now it is part of Domoticz. It started more than a year ago because I found it rather hard to write simple or even more complex scripts, because the information needed in my script wasn't that easy to get to. So I started dzVents. I wanted a simple API to control my devices, an API that would hide all the inner nitty-gritty technical details needed to tell Domoticz what to do. It should be easy to use and of course well documented. So after more than a year and with many happy users of the add-on, we decided to integrate it into Domoticz. So it's even easier to use for those who don't know exactly how to install add-ons manually. So in this short video I want to show you how easy it is to get started. In the near future I'm planning to create more videos to dive deeper into all the features of dzVents, but for now let's focus on getting started. The video will be improvised mostly as I didn't have time to prepare it that much, but that shouldn't be a problem I hope, so bear with me. Right, let's get started. First let's get to the documentation. I've opened the Domoticz website, go to the wiki, and you can either search for dzVents, but I see that it is here already listed in the index. I've tried to make the documentation as complete as possible with lots of examples, so after the video I encourage you to read it yourself. It has clear sections, also a quick start, how to write scripts, information about all the about the Domoticz objects, the devices, everything. So back to Domoticz. I assume you have the latest version of Domoticz running. I created for this video a test instance with a couple of devices. I think that will be enough to give an idea of how dzVents works. As you can see, I've created a scene, a couple of switches and devices, temperature sensor, a text device, and they are all separated in these different sections, as you are familiar with in Domoticz. First of all, what we have to check is go to the setup and the settings and make sure that you have here this added, because dzVents need to have access to the HTTP API of Domoticz without needing a password, because some commands have to be issued using JSON calls. So just make sure that this is added here. Maybe you already have a couple of IP addresses here, but make sure that 127 is added here as well. Then go to the Other tab. In the Other tab you can see here, if you have the proper version of Domoticz installed, you see here 8025 or higher, doesn't matter. You can here enable or disable the dzVents event system, and you can set the log level. The log level is interesting, especially in the beginning when you start writing scripts with dzVents, because dzVents can give you all kinds of information about how it's being executed. If you go to the settings here, the settings in the documentation, you get information about different log levels there are. For now, I'm going to pick the default setting, as this gives us plenty of information to get started. For the sake of this demo, I will open the Domoticz log in a separate window, and here you can see that I already have some log messages. Right. As you can see, I have a couple of devices. There are actually two ways of writing event scripts. One is using the file system, and one is using the internal web editor. I'm going to show you how to use the internal editor to write scripts. In the settings, you can go to more options and then events, and here you will get the event editor. For the purpose of this demo, we switch to the new option here that's called dzVents. It will create a blank template with lots of information. Don't let it scare you because it shows a lot of information, but most of the time you will remove everything because you need to start with a clean and empty script. But I've created a default template to get you started. The other way to write script is not using the integrated editor, but to use the file system. The file system, let me show you. This is the install directory of Domoticz. There's a folder scripts, and here you can see the old location for Lua scripts, and there's a new one called dzVents. dzVents has a couple of subfolders, and for you this is the most important folder. Here is the place where you will write your scripts. The scripts that you write with the internal editor will be generated in this folder, as dzVents only runs from the file system. Don't worry about it, it will go automatically. Just make sure that you don't edit any scripts that's being placed in this folder, as they will be overwritten when you change anything from the Domoticz interface. So your custom scripts go in here, and the generated scripts go in there. But for now, let's focus on the internal web editor, and because that's the easy way to go. Writing internal scripts is handy because they are part of the database. So if you back up your database, you will also back up your scripts. So for now, I'm going to create a clean and simple script. Let's get rid of some of the information not needed for now, and start with an empty script skeleton. Let's open a new tab to see our devices. So I go to duplicate, go to my switches, and let's say that that I want to write a script that as soon as I turn on the living lights, that the kitchen light will go on as well. So I give the script a name. I say living room. Press save. Nothing happens just yet because the event here is not active. But for us, we can now start writing. Every script with these events has this basic structure. It has an active setting. If it's false, the script will not be executed. This is mainly interesting if you write file system based script, because in the web editor there's already a check mark that says if the script is active or not. So if you disable the script and you set this one to true, it won't be executed. But for now, let's leave it here. There are a lot of options what you can do for active. You can create a custom function for active, but for now let's leave it to true. The other part is the on section. The on sections are basically the triggers for your script. In this case, we want to make a trigger for our device, and the device is in this case living, and I call it living. Right? The execute is the actual part of your script that's being executed as soon as the device is triggered, as the on section is matching with whatever is in there, whatever the event is that is occurring. So let's assume that we make a script for living light, and when it's done, I'm going to create a log message. Every execute function will have these arguments, at least this one, the Domoticz objects. The Domoticz object gives you information about your Domoticz instance. It's quite extensive and I will show you in a second. But for now, let's make it simple and let's write something in the log. Living lights are switched. We don't know if it's on or off at this stage, but that's something for later. So I activate the script and I press save. Overwrite, yes. And in the logs you can see that it writes the file to the generated script. Right, now back to the devices. I'm going to switch it on and see if we can get a message in the log. There you go. I initiated the switch command, living set on, and here these events will start showing information about the script. It says handling events for living. This is the device, the value is on, and it starts the script, internal script, living room, and this is the message that we have set in our script. There you go. Now, let's say that if the device is switched on, I want to switch the kitchen light on as well. As you can see here, the living is one switch and the kitchen is another switch. Going back to the script, the second argument of our execute function is the device, and that's actually the device that is being triggered. You can put more devices in here, and depending on which one of those is triggered, that device is the device that will be handed over to you in the execute function. So for now, let's get rid of this, and you can rename this one. Living. You can rename this argument. The argument is still a device object. And in the documentation, I will show you in a second what the device object allows you to do. So let's go to the documentation. In the documentation, you will see that there's documentation about the Domoticz object. That's this item that's being handed to you, and the other one is the device object. Let's go to the device object. Device object has a lot of attributes. A couple of attributes are the same for all devices, but there are also attributes different per device type. So one of the things that we can use, for instance, is the state of the device. So let's go to find the switch. In this case it is switch here, and we'll find the switch. Here's a switch or a dimmer or selector, and you can see that the switch has the state. Oh, the state is a generic attribute that will be listed at the top here. So here's the state. That's the state of the device. Every device has a certain default state. So for now, let's see if we can show what the state is in the log. Domoticz.log, and I'm going to print the living state. Right? So going back to the device, switch it, and here we can see it should show us the state. Why isn't it showing? Let's see. Let's see what happens now. As I said, it's all improvised, so let's get this going. Oh, I know, I didn't save it. Going back, I forgot to save it. I'm not really that used to this internal web editor, so let's change it back, and I say living.state, right? Save, overwrite, and now we go back to the switch it on, and see what happens. There you go. Here it says on, and when I press it again, you will see switch off. See? Cool. So it is working. Now what I can do is say, okay, if living.state is off, is on, then, and now we're going to need to switch on the kitchen device. So how can we get to the kitchen device? Well, the Domoticz object that's being passed has a collection called devices. Let's show you the documentation. We go up here, and here we can see the Domoticz object, the Domoticz attributes, and here you can see it has a collection devices. Device is a function, and you pass it along the name of the device, and it will give you a device object. And the device object is listed below. You can see here, and depending on the device type, you get all kinds of attributes and device-specific attributes and methods. So for now, let's get to the kitchen. Kitchen is the devices kitchen. Check the name, it has to be exactly the same, kitchen. And now we can say kitchen switch on, because kitchen is a switch, and if we look in the documentation, you can see that a switch has a switch on method, also a switch off, and even a toggle switch. We're going to use that later. So, and save it, don't forget. And now let's see what happens. I click on the living, and there you go. As you can see, the script was triggered, the living lights are switched on. So now you can see they're switched on. If I switch it off, nothing will happen, because as you can see, oh, sorry, go back to the editor, events, living room. As you can see, we only do something when the state is on. We can make this, if we want to go them in sync, we can change it, and we can say, okay, we can say do it like this. We can say, okay, there you go. Whenever the living light switches, we can toggle the switch. We toggle the kitchen along as well. So as long as they are in sync, then this will work, of course. If they are out of sync, the one is on and the other is off, then they will stay out of sync. But just for the example, this will be good. So we save it. Okay, override it. Go to the switch. Oh, they're now out of sync, so they will be switched like this. Well, use your imagination and you can see how to make them in sync. Right, so let's create another script. Let's create a script that as soon as I switch the kitchen on, that I set the living, which is a dimmer switch, to 25%, right? So I copy this script, I say new, it gives me the template, and I remove this and I paste it. In this case I change it to kitchen. In this case I call this device kitchen. Let's turn this off, delete it, and then I can say okay. Get used to the keyboard shortcuts. Living, I'm going to dim to 25. As you can see here, we can see in the documentation, if there's a dimmer, there is a dim to percentage. Of course, this only works if you have a dimmer device. And let's say that if kitchen.state is on, then we say dim to 25, and otherwise Domoticz.devices living switch off. There you go. And give this a name, call it kitchen, save. There you go. And kitchen is active and living is active. Just have to check. Right. So let's see what happens. I switch it on. And there you go, 25%. See? And if I switch it off, it goes off. Exactly as we've programmed in our script. Now, let's go to another way of writing scripts. As you can see here, we have now used a device as the trigger, but we can also make a timer trigger. Earlier you could have timer scripts in Domoticz events, and they will be executed every minute, but dzVents has a lot more options than just every minute. So let's create a script that toggles the hallway switch every minute. That's the easiest one. So I'm going to make a copy of this script, create new, remove this because we're going to change it. Doesn't matter. And I call this timer because we're making a timer section. And in the timer section I can make timer rules every second. And now, as we have not a device as a trigger but a timer as a trigger, then the second argument in our execute function doesn't mean anything, because normally that's when using a device, this would be the device that's actually being changed, but in this case it's a timer function, so this will be nil, this will be empty. So I call this dummy or whatever, it doesn't matter what the name of this argument is. But every time, sorry, this shouldn't be every second, this should be every minute, of course, because the shortest interval time from the Domoticz is every minute. So every time the script is triggered, we're going to toggle the hallway. So we again use the Domoticz object, devices, hallway, that's the name of the device, you can see it here, hallway, and we say toggle switch every minute. Okay, we say flashlight, save. All right, let's see what happens. You can watch the I've created a couple of scripts that are going to be looping. So let's turn these event scripts off, save, okay, and this one off. That's something that you have to take care of, that you don't write scripts that are triggering each other, to make sure that it doesn't start looping. Okay, so for now we have only one active script, and that's the flashlight script, and that should be executed every minute. Let's see. You can see that the hallway is on, and in a while it should turn on, turn off. Okay, be patient. There you go. Refresh, now it's off. So here you can see start internal script flashlight trigger every minute, finished. So here you can see information about the event. Interesting is that you can filter, and if I click here and I type command, oh, it won't let me type for some reason. Probably busy doing something. Oh, here you go. Let's do a refresh on the page. Sometimes when the log gets long, it takes a long time. dzVents. So you can filter only dzVents event messages. Right, so the script is now toggling every minute. But you can do a lot more with the timer rule. If you go to the documentation, you can see all kinds of timer settings. Here, the timer trigger options. You can do every minute, every other minute, every 2 minutes, every hour. But you can say, even can say at a specific time. You can do like this. What time is it now? It is now 9:45, let's say at 9:46. Save it. Okay, let's see what happens. So it should toggle at 9:46, but only then. Let's see what happens. Good things will come for those who wait. There you go. And it toggled it off. Here you can see. Trigger at 9:46. You can see here what the actual rule was that was triggered. Let's go back to the editor. Events, flashlight. Or you can even say, okay, I want to have every minute on the 9 hour. Or I want to have every 20 minutes, every hour. And you can make all kinds of combinations. You can say, I can have multiples, like at 7:30, but only on Monday, Friday, and Saturday, and so on. The shortest amount is 1 minute. That's the shortest interval time, because that's the time that Domoticz uses to trigger the event system. So using timers, you can have timer rules. You can create all kinds of interesting schedules for your events. Now, all right. Interestingly, this on section doesn't force you to use only one kind of trigger. You can say, okay, I have a timer trigger, like say every minute, but also a devices section that says, let's say, let's see what we have. All right, let's say the kitchen. So I can say kitchen. Don't forget the comma. So now I have two sections in my trigger in my on section. I have a devices section and I have a timer section. And whatever thing is triggering it, it will execute the function. So what happens now is every minute this will be toggled, but also when the kitchen device has been changed. So let's see. Save. Okay. Go to the devices. And now when I click this one, you can toggle the switches. But it will also happen when the timer rule is fired. Let's see what happens. It's almost there. 15 seconds. There, here, you see. And let's switch. So you can make all kinds of combination of devices and timer rules. There's actually a third argument which is called trigger info. And the third argument, trigger info, let's see here. You can see in the description the signature of the execute function. It has the Domoticz object, that's this one. It has the device or the variable if you have a variable script, and you have trigger info. And the trigger info is kind of interesting as you have here a combination of different triggers. You can check what actually the event was. Like here, trigger info. The type, you can have an event type timer, device, or security, or a variable. So you can actually use this argument, this parameter, to distinguish if there was either a timer event or a device change event. I will not go into too deep in this one. You can read all about it in the documentation, and maybe in the future I will make a video of how to use that actually. Right, so let's have a short look at the Domoticz object. Domoticz object gives you information about your Domoticz instance. Here, let's go to documentation. As I said before, it has a couple of collections. One is the devices collections. It has a groups collection. It has a scenes collection here. It also has the time, that's the current system time. And the time object is quite easy to use in dzVents because it did all kinds of things for you. For instance, let's give an example. Let's turn this one off. Save. Alright. And let's go to the kitchen. Switch. Let's just use this script and let's say domoticz.log and let's say domoticz.time, and the time is an object. The time has all these sub attributes. For instance, the raw time, which is just a string, piece of text. It won't help you that much, but maybe for display purposes, but it's hard to use the raw value to do calculations. But let's see if this works. Let's activate it and save it, and let's see what's going to be printed. I click the device, and then we should see here the time. Here you can see the raw time. Now back to the script. We can all see the information about whether it is nighttime or daytime. It has to do with sunset and sunrise time. This is just a boolean. This should be true. Oh, be aware that you have to convert it to a string, otherwise Lua will complain, because this is a boolean and you cannot print a boolean. So we convert it to a string. Let's save it. Alright, and click the switch and see what happens. There. Oh, interesting. It says it's false. That's cool. See what says nighttime. Of course, you need some bugs, otherwise you cannot improve the product, right? So save. Switch off. True. Right. I think we just mixed it all up. But that's interesting because the information is coming from Domoticz. So, well, let's let's look at that after the video, what's going on there. But normally you would see here a true if it's nighttime and false if it's not. You also have the other parts like how many minutes, which month it is, what the hour of day is, etc., etc. There are also a couple of methods on the Domoticz object. For for instance, you can send notifications. Well, we already saw the log. We use this. And interesting about the log is that it uses the log level from the settings. Of course, you can do print, but then you cannot control it using the log level in the settings of Domoticz. So default it's log info. There are different log levels, but you can change that. But there's also a way to send out an email, or you can open a URL. The URL is then executed by Domoticz after the script has finished, and you can send notifications. These are the most important ones. Right. Also, there are a couple of constants that you can use. For instance, when sending notifications, there are all kinds of sounds that you can pick. Here you can have you see the log levels listed here. It can be used. So all this information is in the Domoticz object. The device object, that's the second argument, is also the device that you will get when you pick a device from the device collection. And the device object, depending on the type, I said that earlier, has all kinds of other attributes. It can tell you if the device was changed, because if it was triggered, then of course device changed is true, but if it wasn't, then it is false. But there's all kinds of information that you can use for the device. So the device has generic attributes, that's the same for all devices, and it has specifics. Depending on the device type, you have different kinds of attributes. For instance, now let's give an example. The text device. As a simple text device, and we have used it. I have created one here as a text device. So let's use that one. So whenever I press the switch, let's go to this. Whenever I press the kitchen switch, I want to change the message in this text device. So going back to the kitchen script, we're going to use it for everything that we like. I say, okay, Domoticz devices, and I call this, I called it messages, I believe. Let's check here, messages, yep. And I say, I look into the API for text, it says update text. It says update text, and I can say the switch is, and then kitchen.state. Save. All right, let's see what happens. Press it. The switch is on. There you go. Here, I turn it off. The switch is off. So this is the actual text that we have put in this message, in this method. So just check out the API for your specific type. All right. Of course, it's possible that you have a device type that is not listed here. Please let me know, and we will create the proper adapters to make it work, just like this. Right. One thing to be aware of is that when you use this interface to get to a device, you use the device name. Make sure if you want to use names that the names are unique, because dzVents doesn't know which one of the device you meant if there are multiples with the same name. So another way to do it is by using an ID instead of the name. For instance, the ID will never change, but the name might change. So if, for instance, if we change the name of this device, like this, text messages, and then run the script, we'll probably get an error. Let's see. probably says here, you can see dzVents error. There's no device with the name messages, of course, because we renamed it. So what we can do instead is, let's go back to the script, events, kitchen. Instead of using this, we will use the ID. So where's the ID? The ID is going to devices, and we can find the message is ID number 6, and we use it here. 6. Or better, what I used to do is local messages is 6, and then I use here messages. Right. I save it. There you go. And then we go to the switch and see what happens. Here we get an error. No, it doesn't work. Insert options, events, kitchen. Oh, there you go. I called it message and it should be messages. My bad. Save. Okay. And then back to the switches and switch the kitchen on, and there, here it says on and here it says off. Good. So there you have it. Alright, that's enough for now. There are many more options for triggers, for timers. You can have all kinds of stuff with persistent data, but for getting started this should be enough. Alright, cool. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time, and I hope you enjoy working with dzVents, and let me know if there are problems.